Hi everyone! Today I'll be showing you my Art Nouveau Zelda speed paint. I drew this piece back when the trailer for Tears of the Kingdom came out and I was so excited for the game to release. Some of you suggested I make more of this kind of video. I really enjoyed responding to comments for the kind of brushes that I use and my sort of process, so I figured with the Zelda piece I would just talk through how I went about it. Here I'm just laying out the base sketch, looking into where the shading is going to be, all the different shapes, looking at the background, what kind of framing we're going to have, and just mapping out final details. So if you look at the piece just now, she's actually wearing her ceremonial dress from Breath of the Wild. So I'd started my line art, as you can see here, and then the full trailer came out and she had her new outfit and we knew what it was going to look like. So obviously I had to update it so that it would have the new outfit for the new game. So I'm just going back in here, adding her new jewellery, adding the sort of ornaments around her neck and on the dress. It was just absolutely amazing to get in on that. You can see as well from the necklace, obviously we didn't know that she had the secret stone at the time, so I just sort of improvised and based it on the other jewellery that she was wearing. So I'm just going back in on line art now and going into proper details. And then just going into the earrings, going into the headpiece, making sure that it all looked pretty accurate to what I could see in the trailer, working on some hair framing pieces around the head and around the face, drawing the braid and just trying to get her hair looking as voluminous as possible. And here's where my iPad died. So it had been on its last legs for a little while and it crashed and I lost so much. I was really upset. I'd worked on this piece already for so many hours. Luckily I'd taken a screenshot just before the iPad crashed, so I was able to import that screenshot and painstakingly retrace over all of my work so far and then continue on, so you can see the sort of flashing between, and that's me just making sure everything's in place. I then started adding the flowers, so of course I had to add Silent Princesses because they're Zelda's iconic flower. I love the inspiration that Art Nouveau takes from nature, and Alfonso Muca's work has a lot of flowers in it, so I like to try and pick a flower that represents the person I'm drawing to draw around them. I'm just going in just now with the details of the flowers, going into the petals, trying to give a sense of depth through line rather than just using colour. I also really like the organic feel of the hemp brush that I'm using in Procreate. I then started working on the background. With Art Nouveau pieces I sometimes struggle with the shapes that I want in the background, but I knew I wanted to include Sheikah script in some way, so I worked it into the archway behind her, and this process took so long. I've actually sped up this next part because it took forever to draw all the parts and to have the message that I wanted encoded in the piece to make sense, make sure I didn't make any mistakes. So I did spend a lot of time working on the background purely to get the Sheikah in. I think it's worth it because it looks really nice. I then moved on to the corners and I knew I wanted to include the Triforce in some way, so I started sketching and seeing what I could come up with. After this I got a little bit stuck, wasn't really sure what else to add, so I just thought, oh, I'll come back to it later, I'll figure something out to fill in those white spaces. So instead I then decided to focus on the Ouroboros slash dragon slash at the time we didn't know, trying to figure out what was going on there. I then went back into the corners and I sort of stole that motif from Zelda's blue outfit that she wears when she goes out with Link in Breath of the Wild, and it has these sort of gold spiralling shapes on it, so I tried to emulate that in the corners, not just because they call back to Zelda's old outfit, but also they look really nice and they sort of fit the Art Nouveau style. I then added little hearts in. I wanted to have the heart containers in just as a little extra detail, another callback for people who zoom right in and look in the details of the piece. I then went round Zelda and the flowers with a thick outline, just to make them stand out from the background. And then I decided to go back to the dragon and see what was happening here. So I started drawing, did not like it, started again, started to find something that I like. I took some inspiration from the Zelda dragons from Breath of the Wild, and then took some inspiration from fantasy illustrations to come up with a dragon of my own that sort of resembled what was in the trailer, and I just worked on that. Again, this part is sped up even more because it took forever, but it was definitely worth it because it looks great in the end. So once I'm finished with the liner, I then start colouring. Recently I've been colouring in grayscale rather than going straight in with full colour. It lets me just have a look at the contrasts of the piece, keep an eye on the values, and it means that when I do actually start colouring, the piece will have more depth. So once I'm finished with the grayscale layer, I'll then convert that to a gradient map, which is basically just adding a colour palette to the greys that are already there, and it just keeps the values. So I'll make a couple of those with different colour palettes and combine them together to create a base that I'm happy to work on top of. Normally before I convert to gradient map and add all of the colour layers, I'll do the rendering so that it's got all the shading in the piece, but I forgot this time, so I went back and did it later on. You'll see that later in the video. To add the colours, I'm using a mix of overlay and multiply layers to try and get the colours that I want. They're adding on top of that colour base that I've got with the gradient map, so it's a lot of experimentation, just trying to find the colours that I want the piece to have in the end. So this is when I went back to render. I was working on the piece, adding in the colours and thinking, why does this look so flat? And then I realised it's because I'd forgot to shade before I added colour, so this is me just going back in and doing that just now. I hope you've enjoyed watching my process and how I made this drawing. It's actually really nice to look back and remember how it was to draw it and how excited I was for the game coming out. If you're interested in seeing any more speed paints or videos like this, please let me know in the comments. I've actually really enjoyed making them. I've got quite a few more Art Nouveau pieces I'd been working on, as well as some other bits on the side that I would love to share with you. I also have some events later in the year that I'm really excited for, and all my links are below for my social media where you can have a look at my art. Thanks for watching, bye!